Madam President, I rise today to speak on the immigration bill presently before the Senate today, and first of all to congratulate the leaders who have been able to bring this bipartisan bill to the floor. The Gang of Eight, of course, gets all the attention, but Senator Leahy, the majority leader, and so many others who have added both merit and momentum to this bill deserve to be praised as well. I particularly would like to congratulate Senator Leahy, the majority leader, and the authors of the bill for the transparent process with which we have debated this bill. I don't know the sum total of all the amendments that were considered by the Judiciary Committee, but it was a long markup with virtually every idea and every amendment vetted. We've been standing here on the floor of the Senate now for going on 2 weeks debating this bill, and that's right, that's good. This is one of the most important things that the Senate will talk about. This matters to millions of undocumented people all across this country, but it also matters to millions of other individuals, families, and businesses who have been weighed down by an immigration system that just doesn't work any longer. And today we will be debating a new amendment on border security that will, for many of us, be overkill. But in order to make sure that the perfect doesn't become the enemy of the good, will, I think, bring this very important debate close to a close. Madam President, I rise to talk about one additional amendment that I hope that the Senate will consider, and that is Amendment 1451 that I am offering, that would very simply prohibit the Department of Homeland Security from housing children in adult detention facilities. Now, there is already fairly good law and some good regulation on the books today that protect a lot of immigrant children from being held in adult detention facilities. Many of these children that are classified as something called unaccompanied alien children are required to be transferred to HHS custody within 72 hours. There's some good law and some good regulation built up around this issue already. But the data that we have been getting over the last several years does tell that current law doesn't work for every child in the system. As we learned recently, ICE data says that as many as 1,366 immigrant children were placed in adult facilities between 2008 and 2012. And of these children, apparently about 370 of them spent more than 3 months in an adult facility. 3 months in an adult facility. I just want you to put yourself in the shoes of a little 12-year-old boy who may just be learning how to speak the English language, who maybe came here with his parents and his family, got picked up by himself somehow through the system, got separated from his family, locked up, and his family may have some reluctance to come claim him because they themselves are undocumented, and they worry that they will be deported along with the child. And think about sitting as a 12-year-old little boy alone, perhaps uncomfortable about communicating in an adult facility for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Imagine that for 1 month, 2 months, and 3 months. It's unacceptable. And while DHS disputes some of these numbers and certainly is doing much of what they can to try to make sure that these children don't spend time in adult lockups, the law can be clear, and we can create with this amendment a very clear line for all types of children, no matter how they are categorized, to make sure that they don't spend time in adult facilities. Because there are some very harsh realities to what happens to children who are locked up with adults. We know this because we unfortunately do this for documented children, for American citizens. Too often, when children are arrested on the streets of this country, they get housed in adult criminal facilities within the American justice system. And the National Prison Rape Elimination Commission report found that incarcerated minors are much more likely than adults to be sexually abused, especially when they are locked up with adults. Now, sometimes to try to prevent this from happening, these children are put in isolation in ICE detention facilities. Now, that may protect you from that kind of abuse, but that isolation itself, which can go on for days and days and days, causes serious psychological problems, and sometimes, the data shows, can lead to suicide. Think also of one particular case. Mariana, we'll call her, was 17 years old when she came from Guatemala. She was brought through the Mexican desert by one of these coyotes, and the journey was so difficult that the coyote just abandoned her, 17 years old, by herself in the middle of the desert. She managed to find her way to a highway, and at that highway, the Border Patrol picked her up, and they took her to one of the holding facilities, and they threw her in with a bunch of adults. Now, she was 17 years old, but the Border Patrol officers insisted that she looked like she was in her 20s, and she didn't have her birth certificate with her. But the default was to put her in an adult facility and to not believe her. Finally, a couple very kind women in the facility intervened. They allowed her to call her mother in Guatemala and get a copy of her birth certificate. And finally, after all of this, she was transferred to HHS. This shouldn't happen. And with this amendment, we can create a clearer line to make sure that these children, like Mariana, and like, frankly, the hundreds even younger than her, when they are picked up for whatever reason, are not housed with adults. The amendment would require DHS to determine the child's age when there's any notice or suspicion that the detainee is a child under the age of 18. Then DHS would have to transfer or release the child immediately after determining the child's age, so that children like Mariana would not have to wait and struggle themselves to get out of an adult detention center. My amendment also would make it clear that the best interests of the child should be the main concern in transferring or releasing the child. And finally, building on some of the data reporting requirements that are in the underlying bill, my bill would include a couple of additional categories that DHS is required to report so that we know where all these children are, the conditions with which they're being housed, and whether or not they have a lawyer trying to look out for their interests. I think that this is an amendment that can get bipartisan support. I mean, no matter where we stand on issues of border enforcement or a pathway to citizenship, we all believe that if you are a child that has been detained by ICE through likely no fault of your own, that you deserve to be treated like a child, that you deserve to be housed with other children if you can't be returned to your family. This amendment would do that, and I think be another way that as we conclude the debate on one of the most important bills that this body will take up this year, that we can find a way to bring Republicans together around our common values.